Test, test.
Oh, hi there, Connor.
All right. Success. Test successful. How's it going, Laura?
Good, good. How are you doing?
All right.
So let me come back over. I was looking something up. There we go. Okay. So, and there's Jude. Hi, Jude. You're on mute. Yeah, you're on mute.
Am I still muted or am I not? Okay, good.
I can hear you. I can hear you. And there's Michael. Michael, thank you. I know you weren't sure you could make it, Michael.
Well, I can make it now. If I disappear, I end up having to disappear. So.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here so far.
Yep.
So very nice. We'll wait a moment. I think we're going to have Ed. And we actually do have a quorum. And Jeff had a meeting at 5:30. I had a meeting at 7 o'clock. So it's not clear we're going to have Jeff. One. And we have Jude. And we have David, Michael, Connor. And we'll give it a moment. And I was talking to Ed earlier. I'm pretty sure we're going to have Ed. Hi, David. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Oh, yeah, we're actually early.
Yeah.
So amazing. Yes, I'm the town of Woodstock today.
Hi, David. How are
How
you?
you doing, dude?
Good. Nice to see you.
Yes, quite a while.
So, Jude, you're on the ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals. So and it seems like a year, 2 years. How long has it been?
For me, 2. And then I was on the planning. I was on the planning board in the 90s.
In the 90s. Okay. Well, I was in the planning board in the teens, in the early teens, I think. I was on the planning board, and I always enjoyed it. I thought the planning board was a perfect way to really understand what goes on in town and what the laws are and all that stuff. So it was a pretty cool place to be. So.
And I was on the Land Conservancy board when we started the Land Conservancy.
Uh-huh.
So like a land interest for a long time.
Yep. Yeah. So my clock says 6:31. So Michael's back. We actually do have a quorum. And Connor, you're there, correct? Oh, I see Connor's on mute, and yes, Connor has.
Yes, I am.
Oh, yay. Okay. Well, I will call the meeting to order. So started. I'll give us credit for 6:30. So let me go pull up the agenda, which I sent out. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to okay. As I sent out in an email, and sorry, I make notes as I go along here. As I sent out an email, Jude is joining us today, and Jude may be interested in joining us for good, which would be wonderful because we have a 6-person board. It would be nice to go up to a 7-person or committee rather. It'd be great to go up to a 7-person committee, but anyway, so Jude is joining us, and it may turn out that she really joins us. So she's here today, and welcome, Jude. And so Jude, sound like you know David from the past.
Yeah, I do know David. I also know Ed. Yeah, and of course I know Mike.
Because you're both on the ZBA together. And do you know Connor?
I don't know Connor. I knew Connor's, I think, grandfather.
Yes, yeah. So Connor is on the planning board today. Connor is a member of our zoning revision committee, and Connor has taken a big interest in the scenic overlay, which has gotten hot lately. And so I don't know, Connor, if you, I guess I shouldn't keep saying hello for you, Connor. I should let you say hello yourself.
Hello.
Yay. And Jude, anything that you want to tell us about yourself?
Beyond the fact that I've been living in Woodstock now for 40 years. I live in Willow. I first got involved in land use issues by becoming one of the founding members of the Woodstock Land Conservancy. When we bought the Xena cornfield, I was part of that. Then, there's children interspersed in there. I was on the planning board in the 90s. Then I kind of took a break, and now I'm back on the ZBA. So I'm still very interested in zoning issues and planning issues, and feel like I bring a certain level of experience to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So wonderful, and that's all excellent experience. So sounds perfect. So if anybody sees Ed or Jeff join, let me know, because I might not see them. Anyway. So the agenda today, so first order of business is adopt the agenda. Minute status, it was kind of funny because we used to vote on minutes in the meeting, and somebody said, oh, you can do that by email. So people get the minutes, but I haven't gotten emails back except for one email from Dave accepting one set of minutes. So at some point, I'm just going to put all the minutes in an email and say, hey, can you approve them? So we're still waiting for that. But in any event, I have sent a lot of the minutes out. I still owe some old ones, but in any event, that's the status of the minutes. So this is the agenda. That's the status of the minutes. We'll go through the status of the laws that are in progress. Quick word on the Housing Oversight Task Force, scenic overlay. There are two main topics for today. One is scenic overlay. Connor, I know last time we talked, was hoping he'd be able to get together a list of scenic overlay issues that we can talk about. So we have time for that. And then we want to talk about the proposed neighborhood commercial light industrial law. And so those are the two main topics. What I want to talk about first, so this is it, and then talk about the next meeting dates. So the first question I'll ask is, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Do I have anybody second?
Second.
Yeah, that was Michael. Oh, Connor, that was Connor. So all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Yay. So we have an agenda. So we'll kind of run down through it. The first question I want to ask, I know Michael has said that it's possible we'll lose Michael along the way. Although Michael already said he was good for meetings. I did want to schedule, I wanted to confirm our final meetings for this year. So as people know, I can't meet next week, which would be a normal. We're normally second and fourth Monday. I can't meet next Monday. I was looking to move. It turned out I couldn't meet this past Monday either. So thank you everybody for agreeing to the 15th. So one option was to move the 22nd meeting out to the 29th, but Connor and Michael both said that wouldn't work for them. So that's probably not a good idea. My next question then would be, can we meet on December 6th? And our regularly scheduled meeting is the 13th. But if people are available on the 6th, excuse me, on the 6th and the 20th, we might still get 2 more meetings in this year. I'm not looking to meet on the 27th, which is the 4th Monday of December. No plan of meeting between Christmas and New Year's. But if people want, we can meet on the 6th and the 20th if people are available. Our regularly scheduled meeting is the 13th, depending on, but because we think that so the things going on are that there is, I'm kind of going to run up and down the agenda a little bit here. The things that we can be active on now, one of them is we want to talk about scenic overlay issues. Connor, of course, is on the planning board. So on December 16th, the planning board is going to be hosting a scenic overlay discussion because there was a big, big application, well, a critical application, big depending on how you look at it. There was a critical application that was before the planning board that was in the scenic overlay, and the planning board did say the scenic overlay law says that we shouldn't adopt the site plan as it exists today, and they denied the applicant. So we're still not sure what the applicant's going to do. Oh, I'm not sure. I don't know if the planning board's sure. I don't know what the applicant's going to do next. But there was a lot of discussion over that because of the scenic overlay law and the processes and what did the zoning officer do? Woodstock has a zoning officer. What did they do? Oh, you know what? I just want to make sure that we're recording. Because this is supposed to
I'm pretty sure we're recording. I had to sort of consent to it before.
Oh, you had to consent to it. I just want to take a moment and it looks like.
There's a button up there that says you're recording.
Yay, and there it is. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So in any event, so the scenic overlay, so one of the things we might be talking about in our next meetings is, and whether we meet on the 13th or the 6th, we're meeting before December 16th. So we'll have one more time to talk about what message we want the zoning revision committee to take into the planning board meeting about scenic overlay. But also we can get going on this neighborhood commercial light industrial law. And so if we meet twice, we get more of a chance to make more progress on that. So if we meet twice, that would be great. If people aren't available and you just say, hey, we should just meet on December 13th and have that be it. So I do want to know from everybody, should we go with meeting December 6th and December 13th, December 6th and December 20th, the first and third Mondays, or is December 20th too close to the holidays? Maybe we'd rather just keep it the 13th and say we're good. So who has an opinion?
No opinion.
Well, I don't know that I'll be able to make a meeting the 6th because of overlapping vacation. But
Okay.
20th,
Okay.
I have strong feelings about it.
Okay. Well, so we can just keep December 13th. I mean, we're already booked for that. We can just keep that and have that be it. I don't know how everybody else feels about it. I mean, we want to make progress, but the holidays are coming, so it is what it is. So, okay. So should we say we're agreed on sticking with, and I'm looking for the agenda there. We agree we're sticking with December 13th. And so can everybody on this call make December 13th?
I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
As far as I know, I might die before then, who knows?
And Ed joined. Hi, Ed.
Hello.
Hello. So we've already approved the agenda. And now we've already introduced Jude, who I think said she knows you anyway. So we're just discussing meeting dates and whether, I don't know if we would have a quorum. I'm not sure how much of that conversation you heard, Ed, but I just want to make sure I know when we're meeting next. My thought was we could meet on maybe December 6th and December 20th instead of the 13th to make progress on the neighborhood commercial and light industrial with our conversations.
Well,
but if people,
the
what's that?
neighborhood commercial is going to be a big deal. You know,
Yes.
I have many, many questions about the efficacy and usefulness of that amendment. So,
Okay.
and the history of it, the whole thing raises a lot of flags in my mind. So, you know, I wouldn't think we're going to get through that in a single or two meetings.
Okay. Well, is it better for us to try to meet twice to address it, to try to meet on December 6th and the 20th to try to make progress on it? Or based on timing and 20th is too close to Christmas, would we rather just meet on the 13th and just pick up again in January?
I don't care. I will obey the will of the group. I just say there's, in my mind, it's a very problematic zoning amendment. And
Okay.
it's going to take quite a bit of discussion, I think.
Okay. Well, I know Connor said he couldn't do the 6th. David said, well, David, so Ed, are you available on the 13th? If we keep December 13th, is that a good date for you?
Yeah, I'm available. All I do is I'm glued to my computer. All I do is write. So, you know, I'm here.
So, okay. Well, we'll just keep December 13th because that's our regularly scheduled meeting. And that's our last meeting for the year. And then we'll pick up in January. And okay. So we talked about the meeting dates, and I'm going to invite Grace Murphy to that because I'd like to have us hear from the Complete Streets Committee, and we've already agreed that me inviting her is okay. So I'll tell her December 13th. I'm going to book her for that meeting. Okay. So status of laws, we'll run through this really quickly. So water supply protection, I did get a chance to update the water supply protection law. I merged in Supervisor McKenna's thoughts with it. So what Bill McKenna still, our big discussion is exactly what section number should it be in. The zoning law has different articles. And so it could be Article 5 or it could be Article 6. And so Bill's going to give that some thought, and we'll figure out what section it goes in, which is not a change to the wording. It's it just says, where's it going to go? So I review with Ed the changes made so far, and Ed's the one closest to this because he was part of the group that wrote this law. So anyway, so I think it's looking pretty good in terms of what the wording is. And then once we have the final document, once we have those answers, where it's going to go, et cetera, I'm going to be sending it back around to the board and finalize the map decision. We know we have a map that came from Steve Winkley. We have a map that came from the Natural Resource Inventory effort. The board needs to make a final decision on the map. And I think it may have to go back to the planning board before it moves forward. But in any event, but there's definitely progress there. Regarding the wireless law, because Jude, just so that you know, we have two laws that this committee has produced, and I thank Ed Sanders, who is has done the lion's share of things. He was on the team that brought forth the water supply protection law, and Ed did most of the writing, but Ed and Dave both worked together on call it regulating wireless. Anyway, we have the lawyer, Andrew Campanelli, that the town has hired to give us suggestions. Andrew said, oh, I have a couple of questions you need to answer so I can finish this write-up. And we've been trying to book time that he can meet with us on sharing what those are. He sent us an email with what those are, but he wanted to follow up with a meeting. And when we said, well, when can we meet? So it took him a month to send us a write-up of what the questions were. And now that he's done that, we say, okay, now when can we meet? And we don't have an answer from him yet.
Well,
so
what are the questions?
What are the questions? Well, there's a there's a good question. I've got them on a piece of paper. One of the questions is, for example, when somebody wants to put in a tower, do we want that request to go to a paid employee? Maybe it's the building department, the building inspector, or somebody that we pick that gets all of these requests for telecommunications towers, or will it go to like a volunteer board like the planning board? So Andrew Campanelli will write up his proposed law updates. He'll write it differently depending on, do we want to have it be an employee, or do we want to have it to be a volunteer board? So that's one of the questions. And there's another question. I have to go look at my information on it. But in any event, it's something that he'll be discussing further with Bill McKenna and me. And then any outreach we need to do to the other board members will do, and then we'll get back to him with an answer. And then he'll get us his proposed law updates. And then we'll wait 2 weeks to give everybody a chance to review it. And then we'll have the meeting we've been talking about where we review it. So that this is still with Andrew Campanelli. He's at least told us what the topics are. It turns out there's 2 questions. He shared information on that, but he still has to let us know his availability for a meeting. So we've got, go ahead.
So it's not clear when. You see, this is a very volatile and controversial law that David and I have upgraded, and Campanelli's going to add to, but he's submitted it's 2 questions, right? 2 decisions that the board has to make about who's going to handle applications for small wireless facilities or for towers, right?
Yeah, well, I can bring it up. Yeah, okay. So here's here's what it is, and we can all look at it together here. There is an attachment, but without looking at the attachment, I don't know if you can read this, whether it's too small. The first and most critical revision needed pertains to requiring applicants to provide critical information without which the board will be completely powerless to deny a special use permit for a new facility because it will not obtain from the applicant substantial evidence based upon which it could ever deny any application without violating the TCA. I have attached for review a sample section for application requirements, which I drafted for another town within the state of New York. See attached section, blah, blah, blah. provide specific requirements that very specific types of test results be provided in those cases within which an applicant seeks to claim that their proposed new facilities are necessary. Again, this is not something I can explain in summary fashion, but I will tell you that much of this pertains to a 66-page study and report, which was completed by the FCC staff in August, wherein they concluded computer-generated propagation maps being provided by wireless companies are inherently unreliable. So this is the first topic he wants to talk about. I'm not sure what his question is, but that's the first topic. The second thing he says, an area within the code must be revised pertains to the shot clock. Given the new shot clock periods for small wireless facilities, many jurisdictions now essentially vest someone with the duty of being a gatekeeper for all new wireless applications. Upon receipt of all new applications, the gatekeeper determines at the earliest point possible whether or not the application fits the definition. So this is identifying who the gatekeeper will be, and will it be a town employee or a volunteer board? Whether or not the application fits in the definition of a small wireless facility, and if it's complete, in that it contains all the required documentation which the code requires to be submitted. So again, he says the shot clock, and who do we want to assign to that? So he goes on to say more stuff, but so those are the two things. One is a section about, giving what you require the applicants provide, and the other being, how do we handle the shot clock? Do we do it by assigning a town employee to get these applications and to handle it within the shot clock?
Well, in reading a good number of Mr. Campanelli's laws he's written, like the one out in California, you need somebody to challenge the coverage map that a wireless company gives as what it proposes to do. They could give you just an X's and O's map. It needs somebody to make a judgment on the map, and that's not, I don't think that's a volunteer. It's not the planning board. The planning board with the expertise to judge whether the map supplied by a telecommunications company is real.
Right.
We were going to have to either hire an expert, somebody. It's going to cost the town money because Campanelli has many good qualities, and one of the qualities is he has raised the suspicion of towns judging whether the coverage map or the overall map supplied by the telecommunications company is real, and not just a metal muffin,
Right.
So I don't know, maybe think of some way to charge like you would for somebody who wants to do a subdivision. Sometimes you make them pay a fee for hiring an expert to judge what they're proposing.
Yep.
And we may need a fee structure for applications for telecommunications towers and antennae.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, it would be nice to see, at least to send to me the attachment that he suggests.
Right, or that he's used. Okay. An attachment, okay. Okay, all right. So I don't want to spend too long on this topic. I just want to give a status of where that is. So that's where that topic is. Housing Oversight Task Force, which includes 3 members of this committee, Jeff Collins and Michael and myself. So those bi-weekly meetings continue, and then we'll be sharing documents, I think pretty soon when they're ready to be reviewed. We've already talked about the next meeting dates. So the next thing we want to talk about is I know, Connor, you thought the scenic overlay and the proposed neighborhood commercial light industrial law, which we've already talked about briefly, to say it's going to take a lot of conversation. But the main topic for today, Connor, is whatever you wanted to share with, were you able to put together some information, Connor, about we're able to put together, you're going to start a starter list of topics with the idea that when the planning board has their December 16th meeting to talk about scenic overlay, we as a zoning revision committee might want to be making our own statement about what we think ought to be addressed. So Connor, did you get a chance to pull together a draft?
Well, it's a short list of sort of general ideas of how to approach the issue.
Can you share your screen, or you'll just tell us about it?
I'll just have to, I have it in a notebook here, and each one of these is sort of a general topic, but it sort of begs more questions that, like we had talked about before, you know, may be worth asking for an attorney to take a look at to see if these are even worth pursuing.
Right.
I'll just to me and Ed have, you know, been reviewing some of the language already, and so Gil had heard some of this already. Sorry about that, Ed. But the short of it is that the problems we're dealing with now in the planning board just seem, you know, like all the ideas being thrown are all about mitigation, and that has its own, you know, important place. But right now, the part to wrap your head around is how do you prevent this stuff, essentially. Also, how do you do it when the people who are perpetrating it have, for all intents and purposes, limitless resources? At least not, at least as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure that's a relative thing, but for our purposes, you know. I think the biggest part of this is to start, I think, to hold more people accountable at various stages of the process. That includes the purchase of the land. So at that stage, I think it's going to require, I think one thing that should be done is require realtors, anyone selling and selling land in the scenic overlay, to provide some sort of document that the town can draft or approve to say you are acknowledging that you are purchasing land in the scenic overlay. There is a sort of understanding and terms of stewardship in that area, and that this serves as notice to say that the people you work with should be conscious of and already aware of the not only the requirements for doing work up there, for the sensitive tree cutting up there, but also what the ramifications are. That right there, you know, is something that I'm sure wouldn't be too complicated to draft up, but can we do it? Can we require realtors to provide this document to anyone who they close with, to say, like, you understand that this is a protected area? Next step, let's see, we have, of course, dealing with the wording, but let's just go in order of the people that this is going to touch. I mean, then you're talking about engineers and architects, and and part of it's a little hard to say, you know, if they're people who can be, I guess, you know, held liable for this kind of thing. But if they, you know, if they provide the applicant with some kind of document that says they're allowed to do something they can't, I guess one thing I'd like to throw out there, Ed, and I don't think we had discussed this exactly, but not only, you know, holding people, not only upping the fine structure, but saying anyone who kind of dropped the ball, like, for example, the form wasn't presented, now that's another fine for the realtor. I don't know. You know, again, the idea being here that the applicants seemingly have limitless resources, but if we start to hold the professionals accountable who are handling the projects, I think we might see more positive movement in terms of people being conscious of the area. So to continue, that document would be, that I was talking about earlier at the realtor stage, that would be submitted to building department, the town, the planning board, whoever. minimizing tree cut. So me and Ed are working on specifically now is we're replacing minimize tree cutting as it appears in the code with something a little more detailed along the lines of any modification. Uh, excuse me. There is to be no non-essential modification or tree removal without prior approval.
Well, including but not limited to topping and limbing of trees in any parcel located within the scenic overlay district.
Yeah.
And then, I also suggested to you that a fine for, you see, somebody, an owner will come in and clear cut before he sells. So you need all clear cutting. Anybody who clear cuts before selling gets a fine. I mean, it can be fined. I think the fine should, if you clear cut a forest within the scenic overlay district prior to selling, then that's a punishable thing. You know, I
Right.
think you need a few $1,000s fine for that.
So, but what I want to jump in for a sec though. One thing that we need to be careful of, because I was at several planning board meetings where the Valley View Way application was discussed, and as the planning board chair said over and over again, clear cutting was not done. Clear cutting has a certain definition. So if we just say no clear cutting, well, clear cutting has a certain definition, and according to the planning board chair, what they did at this one site didn't fall under the definition of clear cutting, but it did fall under the problem that you're supposed to minimize tree cutting. They did not minimize tree cutting. So if we just say, we shouldn't overuse the term clear cutting, we should talk about perhaps unnecessary clear cutting. The other thing that I think that we need to talk about is, as I was talking with one person, and I said about this Valley View Way property, I said, well, they topped the trees off just for their view. So in that person's, when we say minimize tree cutting, in that person's opinion, well, they did minimize tree cutting because it's as if they're entitled to a view, and if they hadn't minimized tree cutting, they would have taken the whole tree down. But by topping the tree, they only took away the part of the tree that obstructed their view. So there needs to be some statement: is somebody entitled to a view or aren't they? Because if your belief is the applicant in the scenic overlay is entitled to a view, then, well, they did minimize tree cutting to get their view. In my opinion,
if I could,
weren't
I'm sorry, if I
entitled to
could hop in just to say that one way we could start to firm that up is to say, is to define non-essential.
Yes.
By saying, this is to be, let's say, non-essential essentially applies to anything non-critical to the safety and essentially all, and has exhausted anything that is not critical to the safety of the building, as well as having exhausted all other site location possibilities.
Right. Right.
Including moving the building or
Right.
or shifting it, anything like that.
Right. So, okay.
I
So I
thought
do.
Ed just gave a definition of what couldn't be done, like topping the trees. He said that, right?
Right. We have that as a draft language that we worked out back and forth. Yeah, all non-essential tree removal or modification included but not limited to the topping and limbing of trees in any parcel located within the scenic overlay district. So you're allowed to clear an area for your structure, and that we need to define what that really means, so that we state vigorously that the visual side of trees in the scenic overlay district is extremely important to the historic and commercial value. Would people come to Woodstock because they want to see these beautiful escarpments and forests? 60% of Woodstock is in the state forest.
Mhm.
So that all that being said, I think yeah, focusing on I agree with Laura, like moving away from clear cutting and making it even more just granular in terms of saying tree modification, tree removal,
Right.
of kind of draws down the scale and opens up our periphery for enforcement, I think. No, we
Mhm.
of course more language is more language. Why not? Like
Yeah.
we can get
Well, you make the more sentence structure more stretched out, but you have to always, we have to always realize that property owners are in whatever district are going to be allowed to do some things with their properties. So we can't restrict the use of land in the scenic overlay so that we fall afoul of the Constitution.
yeah, and
Mhm.
part of that is going to be, I think, in terms having spelled out that all other site location considerations that be exhausted will give us a little bit more latitude before we have at least an offender. And then really one of the hardest questions to address is, how do you effectively, discourage this type of activity so it doesn't happen, not so that it's just a little less convenient or a little more expensive to pull off, which is just, raising the price tag. And
Mhm.
and you had said, and you had thrown it out the number $5,000. I think
Yeah.
that's fine. My question is, can we all, if for example we can get a form at the realtor stage, if we can if it's obvious that someone actively circumvented this, including say the arborist who comes up and cuts in the scenic overlay, or whatever licensed professional, I assume, who operates in the town, what can what can and should we do to fine them, to discourage them? Because at some point, again, if the buck is just passed and to the applicant, they can just afford it. I think, and I don't. And Brad Will, had some very strong feelings on how the last planning board meeting went, but maybe if he had something on the line here in terms of a literal investment in the future of the sustained scenic overlay, he'd be more. He would tamp down his applicants before they do something like this.
So is Brad Will the architect or the engineer? What is his role actually?
I forget. I think I want to say he's the engineer. I
Mhm.
honestly don't remember.
So and the other thing is, I'm making a bunch of notes here. And of course, and somewhere I wrote down, but I don't see it, that we want to have a way of finding people, so there's two things that we want to find, I think. So fine, seller who cuts, cuts trees before selling, and also I think also applicants who cut trees before they even come with their application, which is what, well,
And again,
I'm not sure if this person did, but
all of that could be umbrellaed in just non-essential tree cutting. Like if something
well, but it also includes no matter who does it when.
exactly.
And so, and then how do you go, say you have a seller and they do a bunch of tree cutting, and then they sell the property, and then you have an applicant that comes to the building department and says, oh, I want to do this thing. So how do you go back and find that seller in kind of historical sense? How do you, I mean, there's I was,
I mean,
for
I would
this
think
case,
as a governing body, we would have some authority to send something in the mail. If I get a parking ticket in Texas, I still have to pay it, even if I'm passing through. I mean,
Well, there's some talk about giving the tree committee, which has shown more strength in recent years. some additional powers to monitor things like clear cutting in the scenic overlay district, because I think the scenic overlay district is something that all political beliefs support. You know, everybody likes the beauty, the beauty of the trees and the escarpments and the high places. You know, that's proof that we stuck that in the zoning law 30 years ago, and it still is powerful.
Yeah,
So
so I have written down here. I completely agree. I think we need to fund the tree committee. We need to give the tree committee some type of budget line that is partially funded by the fines that we're talking about, and especially dedicated to mitigation efforts and continued mitigation efforts and monitoring in um, essential in those areas of the scenic overlay that require it. Um, so they would also, I think, I mean, I don't know that this is something we write into law necessarily, though. Let me see what I have here. Hold on. So giving them that budget line also in other senses to say that we could offer, the town could offer, as this is something that we're serious about and invested in, you know, at various stages, to include the tree committee, you know, without a charge to the applicant, and make this easier for them, you know, make this easier for them to know what it, to identify it on the front end as well. But obviously the main function would probably, of at least funding them, would be to assess the damages, provide mitigation strategies, conduct semi-annual maybe or annual follow-ups to monitor the health and growth of trees that are planted towards the viewscape. Because as Peter put it in the last meeting, some of these efforts we're talking about are on like a 30-year scale. And so if we're serious about this and we all want to believe that the tree committee is going to be around in 30 years, let's give them some money and say they will.
Mhm.
I remember when they had the problem with the mountain behind Cooper Lake. The guy cut all the trees. They made him replant them.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and that's what, and kind of what I didn't know about the case that was in front of the planning board is when the applicant was denied, was there conversation that they might come back with a tree planting if they had a site plan that included a tree planting plan? Like, did you advise them to go back and look into a tree planting plan? So when they were denied, were they given instruction of what to come back with to get approved in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that was always, I think, the idea when, especially in the middle of when we were talking about it in the public hearing, we said, you know, like, why are you shutting the door so readily on the tree committee coming up there
Right.
and having a look at this? And it kept dancing around it and not, and just kind of pretending like nothing had happened. And
Right.
that showed a failure to acknowledge what was going on. And so, as I understand it, they've picked up the phone. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure Michael Veach has been put in contact with them, and he's going to be going up there if he hasn't
Oh,
already.
good. Good. Okay. Okay.
he hasn't
So
gone
that's
up.
always the idea here. Like, all right, it's done, yeah, but that doesn't mean there's just more to do now. You know?
Mhm.
The, well, the tree committee has really good people on it now. There's four
Mhm.
women that are really gung ho and on the ball, including Cindy Miro and Gay Lenhart and Carol March. I mean, these people are really on the ball and they have time and they're dedicated. And Beach has made this into his personal,
Crusade.
well, it's his persona and that he's done a real good job, So who knows what'll happen in 20 years, but for the next 5 or 10 years, we've got a tree committee that's really functioning well.
Well, exactly. My whole point is let's assume that will continue by endowing some responsibility on them in a serious official capacity that goes on outside the hamlet. Because right now, I think they're just, really the purview is street trees and stuff in the hamlet. But really, there is this much greater calling, in my opinion, that, it's not going to take away from that, but we've already, as a planning board, called for their advisement multiple times since I've been a member.
Yeah. Okay. So you're running down a list of all the people that might get fined. Well, yeah, one of them was the realtor, one of them the architects and engineers, one of them was the arborist.
Arborist. Yes.
The arborist. So were there more than that?
Not I mean, so far as I can think of. I mean, at some point the town via the planning board needs to, do its due diligence.
Mm.
And if they accept a site plan that has tree cutting delineated and they go inspect it and they do exactly what they said and we don't like it, well, then that's different. But mostly
Right,
what
right.
we're talking about here is accepting site plans either in the wake of or with no indication of cutting that have gone beyond their cutting.
Right. Well, so you want to look for cutting plans and also the cutting reality. Plans and cutting reality.
Yeah, but all that's very accessible. We've already started asking applicants to bring drone photos when
Right.
they have brand new site plans or when they're going to go make when they need to cut in the scenic overlay. We've already had several applicants give us nice detailed photos, and we've been able to identify the canopy, which ones are where, asks some people to alter in small ways, but again, the technology for that's here.
Right. Well, but the case that the Valley View case though was a case where it was really to know that the cutting was done. You needed to go look at the pictures from like a year and a half ago about what did, from a distance, what did that area look like? And then what does it look like now? And you can see there's a big gap in the trees now that wasn't there a year and a half ago. So it was because somebody happened to have these pictures. And I do know that the building inspector did tell the applicant, oh yeah, you can take down dead trees. And then they go and say, oh, see, all these trees were already down. But then I guess we don't know who took them down. So that gets into, winning lawsuits. And I know you said we need to talk to a lawyer and find out whether these things would hold water if we put them in there. But it can be difficult to win a lawsuit sometimes. And if we say, well, we have to have evidence that something was done. And in the case of this property, somebody had pictures from the year before, a year and a half before, and then they had pictures of what it looks like now. But somebody somewhere along the line took down these trees, and the applicant, it may have been true when the applicant said, oh, I just asked the building inspector, can I remove dead trees? And she said, sure, you can remove dead trees. But then pinpointing who took the trees down to begin with could be a little trickier. It may well have been the seller took them down, and then by the time the applicant bought it, I mean, we want to get ahead of people that want to do things and ask forgiveness later, because it seems like there's some doing stuff and asking forgiveness later that happens all the time, and we need to get some teeth in that.
Yeah, I mean, again, this has been a hard problem to wrap our brains around. The other end of this, to kind of say that, like, yeah, there are going to be cases if people are really nefarious and really want to get away with this, then yeah, maybe maybe they will. But that doesn't mean we can't make it harder. Like,
Right.
if you're going to live in this community, if you're going to actually put down roots, just do it right. And if we're just cynically slinging properties, in residential areas from LLC to LLC, that do this clinically, then maybe we have a bigger problem on our hands.
Well,
But,
I guess,
but that is to say, I just want to cap this off by saying the town should be probably looking at a way, again, perhaps through a fund, partially funded through these fines we're talking about. But in the instances where that damage is done and people are like who's liable is not clear, let's step in and say like, okay, yeah, we'll make this right, but it's subject. We are stepping in. We are exercising the right to enforce a mitigation strategy that was, let's just say, pending approval, that was agreed upon when you signed that form with the realtor.
Mhm.
That,
Right.
that this could happen regardless of who is responsible.
I'm sorry, we would do what regardless of who is responsible?
That we can come in and fund
Mhm.
what we deem to be, and ultimately, I'm sure, negotiate with the applicant to be appropriate.
Yeah, one thing Connor is bringing up is the need to think of language
Mhm.
to compel a realtor selling property within the scenic overlay district
Mhm.
to notify a new purchaser of the
Mhm.
fact that
Right.
just bare fact that the land is protected by the provisions of the scenic overlay and the Woodstock zoning law. And
Right.
then tell them to go on the digital towpath or go on the town website and actually take the time to read the provisions of the scenic overlay district. Then we toughen the language of the scenic overlay.
Yeah, I don't know who that was, but anyway.
We toughen the language of the
Moving
scenic
off of it,
overlay
yes.
and put in a bigger punishment for those who clear cut or trim or delimb.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so what are our next steps?
What I'd like to do is show this to just quickly to reiterate, the main questions that I want to bring to a lawyer are, can we, require this document in the first place? If this document is failed to be essentially provided to the provided to the applicant, signed off and notarized in return with the rest of their stuff, they
You
can't.
mean the buyer, the applicant or the buyer? You're talking about the
I
buyer
should say,
now?
yeah, I'm thinking of the applicant because they come to the planning board, but yes, the buyer, whoever is buying in the scenic overlay, can we essentially make that a requirement before they get even a deed, a title, whatever, before they can require a certificate of occupancy?
Okay.
Can we require that?
Well, a certificate of occupancy then is later though.
Yeah, no, that's farther down the line. But I guess that's what I'm saying. If they say no, then how far down the line can we kick such a thing before it becomes a thing? I mean, sale is really where that needs to be, where I want it to be, but that's the question there. And then the question is, can we find a realtor that does not provide that information, that doesn't turn in that, that form or whatever?
Well, I think one of the key issues is to find language that sets up so that realtors know about this requirement. And that's not going to be so easy. That's where we need a lawyer to,
So you say them to notify them.
what language can we stick in the zoning law that would require somehow notify realtors of property in the scenic overlay that they have to tell the new owner, about this law?
Well, I'd say anyone, I don't know how, well, I guess that's, again, a tough thing, but people operating in Woodstock send out a public hearing or something. We somehow got some type of grip around the Airbnb issue through,
Right.
web web hosting and all of that. I mean, again, that I don't know about, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so there's a piece of this I think is important, and that is there are some things that need to change process wise. And by that, I mean, I got the impression in this case that just happened that the planning board chair was saying, well, if the CEO didn't take an action, then don't expect us to take an action because we're not enforcement. But the fact remains there still is a scenic overlay law that says your property has to look like this. Your property, you have to be minimal visibility. And I don't have the law right in front of me, but it's, one of the statements says minimal visibility to the structures. And if you don't do tree planting, no matter who approved trees get taken out, no matter whether the ZEO, the zoning enforcement officer, ZEO, no matter whether the ZEO is going to fine somebody or not for what they did, the planning board still is within their rights to say, we're not going to approve this site plan because we're following the zoning law. And unless you plant some trees, your buildings are visible.
and
So
and that's what we did, and hopefully that will at least start the process and
but
give
but
some
but, but
legitimacy to this.
yeah, but kind of my concern is that's what you did by a 4-3 vote. It was not a 7-0 vote. It was a 4-3 vote. It barely passed. And you had people, including the chair, that wanted to say, oh, we're just going to put this through for whatever reason. So I think there needs to be some process. I think the planning board, and you're right, in this case, they came out and they did understand that they could say no because what was put in front of them, no matter, even though nobody else called the applicant on tree cutting, nobody else called them on it, the planning board can still take an action. You're given a piece of property where the stuff has already happened, and you can still say, hey, you come in front of us to do anything, you gotta make the whole thing right. So
Yeah, and
4-3 is not a bad, John Kennedy won the presidency by 115,000 votes. So, 4-3, you've
Hey.
still won.
yeah,
so
but I didn't know if there's any way we can, and that's a process thing, maybe not a zoning law thing, but it was a
process-wise,
battle.
what to encourage or to essentially put more concrete decision authority to the planning board. Like, one of the things, again, getting the tree committee more involved in just the general process of this whole scenic overlay
Right.
thing, giving them a an approval form, something to say, like, if you are going to cut down trees, maybe that even includes your 20 cord, like, you need to have the tree committee sign off. That might not even have to be an every year thing. When you think about it, the tree committee can come up once. It'll be more of a process the first time, and just say, like, from here to here, they flag off like 2 trees and say the stuff between here you can't cut.
Well, maybe, so, and I'm kind of saying something that you didn't say, but from what you're saying, I'm kind of saying maybe the tree committee gives an approval form. Maybe this is what you said, maybe I just didn't hear you, but anyway, I'm thinking maybe as part of the SUP process for the scenic overlay, the tree committee needs to say, yes, I approve with the tree plan. So, yeah.
The question will ultimately become, though, at what stage would that happen? And,
Right.
and my inclination is to say, if we streamline a procedure, and this would be outside of the zoning law, probably, that would say require drone photography when this is when it's of a certain size or something like that, then then that drone photography can go to the tree committee, who decide based on it and based on the site plans
Mhm.
that ultimately get submitted, if they feel a site visit is appropriate for
Mhm.
them. We'll probably have to go, but
Mhm.
they.
But if the tree committee, yeah, if we did make the tree committee part of the process such that they would need to approve the tree plan on a site plan in the scenic overlay, that actually would be a huge improvement, because instead of Michael Beach having to fight his way for permission to go there, from what I hear you saying, which I'm totally on board with, is it would be great to have the tree committee part of the process, and they would, if the tree committee had to sign off on the site plan for the scenic overlay, in terms of, is the site plan have the right tree plantings to repair what they saw, never mind who took all the trees out, never mind that the zoning enforcement officer didn't fine anybody, never mind any of that stuff. Still, part of the safety net is the tree. If the tree committee had to sign off on the site plan and say, I'm not seeing the tree plantings that you have to have, that would be a huge, that would have helped in this case. That definitely would have helped in this
Yes,
case.
that's exactly what I'm saying, is that the tree
Right.
committee should not only have a line item and and funding to do the mitigation process, but they should have a sign off on the approval of any tree. For let's swing big and say any tree modification or removal in the scenic overlay, not just clear cutting,
Right.
not just necessarily site plan modification, anything to do with cutting down a tree, just the scenic overlay. And just, while we're out here, when we talk about how can we have a reference point, well,
Right.
the technology is there. Like, I bet as a town, it would not be that expensive for us to hire someone to, I don't know, go on to access Google Earth or some service like it to do a broad, high definition shot of just whatever encompasses or a composite of the various scenic overlay areas. Not so high def that you can, scroll down and see someone sunbathing, but high def enough that you can identify parcels.
Well, you can do that now with the county map.
Well, the only thing though there is that those have old photos.
Yeah, they're, well, 2019 or something like that was the last.
And that's not bad, but I've seen them go back like 6 years, and we would definitely need to do it. Well, you'd have to do it every, I don't know, you could probably get away with doing it every decade or so, really, if you're using it. All right, here's our reference for here, and at this time, and then anything that changes drastically from there, is either a problem or was approved.
So, and I'm watching the clock, and we like to hold the meetings to an hour if we can. So we kind of covered all the topics. We covered this one really well. We've agreed we're going to meet next on December 13th. That will be 3 days before the planning board meeting. For us to have a zoning revision committee, well, when I said next steps, the question was, can we ask an attorney?
That's what I want to know.
Ask an attorney, can we do some of these things?
To echo, and again, nothing to them, but like, if we have to ask for permission to get that, I think it's time we do that as a board, and I don't want to get sidelined or have, I'm sure Bill has an opinion, but it'd be nice to have a lawyer in the room to kind of not just to bounce these few ideas off of, but just to say like, okay, well then what is the next, what is feasible then?
Okay.
Or how can we compromise on each goal? What's the most accountable we can hold someone, if not this accountable?
Okay. So So I'll see what I can do about getting with Bill about asking an attorney before then. So at our December 13th meeting, then we'll want to, well, I'll invite Grace Murphy, first of all. I'm going to invite Grace Murphy because you want to hear about complete streets and what we should be thinking about that initiative as we do things. So that's going to be December 13th. And we should follow up on this again on December 13th. We'll see if we can get any attorneys' opinions on some of these things. But but it would be good to have kind of, if you could have a document that we could go through, because what I think what the zoning revision committee wants to provide to the planning board for consideration at this meeting on the 16th is some of these things. So it would be good if,
Yeah, so
I don't know whether you,
I'll keep getting it down. Me and Ed are kind of
Yeah.
plugging away in the background.
Okay.
I will work up, get it done. This is 16th of November.
December.
December.
Well, then-
Yeah, so we meet next on the 13th. So it'd be good if by the 13th, in our meeting on the 13th, it'd be good if we can be reviewing the document that's going to be the zoning revision committee statement.
We'll
And-
be able to come up with something. Connor and I, he's done a lot of good work, and I
Yes.
some ideas, and we'll come up with something.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I'd like to try to submit something to an attorney before the end of this month. Is what.
Well, I don't know if Bill is going to go for that. They're not letting an attorney go. I mean, that's why the planning board doesn't have an attorney.
But
Yeah.
well, nobody okay, so let me clarify the attorney thing. Nobody has an attorney except for the town. So Bill can reach out to the attorney anytime Bill wants to reach out to the attorney. So if somebody needs an attorney, the right process is to go to Bill McKenna and say, we need an attorney for this or that. And then Bill can reach out. There is budget money for a town attorney. And instead of each department having their own budget for the attorney, it's lumped into one attorney professional fees
Yeah,
budget.
but let's just call a spade. Having to go and ask for that versus having it to use at your own independent discretion is pretty different. That's not the same thing as it's separate but equal is not equal, because we're being told no more often than not. And that's what I don't want to have happen here, because we're, and on the one hand, I get we're all volunteers and we have to, but we're giving our time to this thing. We need professional input sometimes. We're not asking for it every week, and if it were not under such rigor, such strict lock and key, I would be a little more understanding, but it hasn't been like that.
Well, we'll see. So what I'm going to try to do is, I know you've got some write-ups, but I made my notes from what was said, and I'm going to be, I'll try to get the minutes drafted early rather than late this time. And by that, I mean, I'll try to write up what I heard, and it may or may not help Connor, you and Ed. I mean, you can take what I've done and either use it, throw it out, whatever you want. But in
I
any
would
event,
love to see your notes if you don't mind.
okay, I will get them drafted up, and then that may help give you a base to start with. So, I mean, you've already got a base on your notebook, but it may help you get them
Can't see
drafted.
it
So
on my camera, but here you can you can hear it.
what was that? You can turn on your camera. I'll take a snapshot. I'll do a screenshot. Yeah, there we go. No, but you covered it really well. So,
Small issue is that Michael and I have been working on the sign regulations.
oh, cool.
And he wants to know, there's ambiguity in the zoning law about the total number of signs that a business can have
Mhm.
in the Hamlet commercial or the Hamlet, the protection overlay district.
Mhm.
But it's definitely the Hamlet commercial. So we're working on that and other things. He's asking his committee
Mhm.
for ideas on how to improve the sign language. But our first
Right.
goal is to try to put a limit somehow as to the number of signs a business can have.
Oh, okay. Well, so we can maybe talk about that some more on the 13th as well, our next meeting. So that would be another topic.
Jude wanted something to say. Did you want to say something, Jude?
Oh, I was just gonna say, when I was on the planning board, we did have a planning board attorney. And we
Yeah.
were allowed to use that attorney, and often it was paid from escrow, through escrow
Yes,
funds.
yeah,
But we definitely, if we had legal questions, we didn't have to ask anybody else. So David, you were right. Used to be like that.
yeah.
Should be like that.
Okay, so our topics for the December 13th, we'll talk more about the sign regulation. And it sounds like we should maybe just put off the neighborhood commercial light industrial. We'll put that off to the new year because, Ed, as you say, that's going to be a deep dive and a lot of intense discussion. So maybe we'll just worry about that. NCLI January meetings. So we'll get into that there. So December 13th, sign regulations. Let me just make a note here. 13th, sign. And you may have more on that. Zoning, scenic overlay rather. And then Grace. So, okay. So we got that figured out too. Is there more conversation we should be having now? I know we're a little bit over our hour, but Judy, any questions you have? So you've listened in. Any questions for anybody about anything?
No, it's good to hear what you're working on. You know, thinking about the scenic overlay issue, it's a big problem. I mean, when you talk about finding somebody $5,000 who's putting a couple $1 million into a project, they're going to be like, sure, yeah, I'll give you the $5. I don't know the way around that. I don't, you know, and that's going to be a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But, you know, but to do, I like the idea of doing an inventory of what exists now. And then being able to look back and see. And David, I don't know if you were referring to, you said over on Cooper Lake Road, I think it was Sandy Rower, who we approved him to the site plan. And then after it was approved, he went and took down a bunch of trees. And then he supposedly replanted, but immediately, of course, sold. So it's a really difficult problem. And but the law has to have some real teeth.
Right.
It's enforceable and it will win in court. And I
yes.
commend you for trying to do something.
Yeah, thank you. Let's make a notes here. Well, all good points. So thank you. Thank you. Okay, so anything else from anybody before we break? Do I have, oh, somebody have something?
No.
Nope. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Dave, second.
Yes.
Aye.
Yeah, Ed seconds it. Aye. Thank you, everybody. Meeting next on December 13th. And thank you very much, Connor and Ed, for your work on the scenic overlay. A lot of good thinking went into there, and it's become a hot topic. Thank you, Ed, for working with Michael on the sign thing. I know Michael brought that up last time. Thank you for helping move that forward. And so we have a lot of good, we've done a lot of good work. It takes a while to get the zoning laws to get all the way through a process, but this committee's done a lot of really good work in a lot of areas, and things are going through the process. So we just have to keep at it, and we are making a difference. So thank you, everybody, and we'll be talking soon.
Bye-bye.